Let me sit down here with you. This is part 3 of our logic foundations, or foundation of logic part 3 video. This one here is going to be kind of a review of the last video, just at least the last snippet of it, where we talk about the conditional statement and we talk about the converse and the inverse and the contrapositive. Now, what I would like you to do as you watch this video is I want you to work ahead. So pause the video after we get started. So when you look at this right now, if you read this with me, I want you to write the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive for this conditional statement that I have. I want you to do that now. So go ahead, pause the video. Go ahead, write down what you think are the converse, inverse, and the contrapositive of this statement. When you're done, come back and I will talk to you about what I got for answers. Then we'll talk about the next portion. So pause it now. Okay, you're back, which means you're ready for me to talk about this. So we talked about the converse, the contrapositive, and the inverse. Here's what we get. When I do the converse, I'm going to switch things. So the first thing I switch is, behind the if, I bring in what was the then from the first statement. I bring in the conclusion of the original statement. So if a student's teacher at Boyer Valley is Mr. Hessman. Now, do I have to have the Boyer Valley on there? I do that to make sure it's referenced to this place here alone. That way it makes it a little easier. So I switch the hypothesis with the conclusion of the original, and then I swap the other two around as well. So then the last part of it is, then the student is in geometry. So there we have the converse of our original conditional statement. Now let's look at the inverse. If you remember, the inverse talks about using the negation of a previous statement. Well, the negation is when you basically add the word not, or you take the not out, you put something else in. So our inverse, we're going to start with our original statement. If a student is in geometry at Boyer Valley, well, we're going to add the word not to that. So basically, if a student is not in geometry at Boyer Valley, well, what does that mean? It means then the student's teacher is not Mr. Hessman. That would be the inverse. I negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion. Now, the contrapositive is the converse of the inverse, or you can say it's the inverse of the converse. So I'm going to have the nots in there, but I'm going to also swap their orders around. So in other words, if a student's teacher at Boyer Valley is not Mr. Hessman, well, that would have to mean then the student is not in geometry. So that's the first part of this stuff that we're looking at here. So we have these things. Now we got this next part. What is the truth value of each one of these conditional statements? So if a student is in geometry at Boyer Valley, and the student's teacher is Mr. Hessman. Well, for us right now, that is a true statement. I am your teacher for geometry. We're not talking about subs because they only come in to take my place. I'm the teacher. So Mr. Hessman is the teacher there. Now, what if we flip it? Look at the converse. If a student's teacher here is Mr. Hessman, then that student is geometry. Well, is that the only thing I teach all day long? No, that is a false statement. So therefore, what other classes do I have? Well, it could be a Math 8 student, or it could be a pre-algebra student, or it could be an Algebra 2 student, or it could be a Calc student. So any one of those 4 areas there could be considered our counter example. What I'd like you to do right now is pause the video and answer the truth value for the last 2. Yes, pause the video, do the truth value. Okay, you're back. So, inverse. If a student is not in geometry at Boyer Valley, okay, not in geometry, then the student's teacher is not Mr. Hessman. Again, this is a false statement, and I can use any one of these same 4 again. Any other student that I have who doesn't happen to be in geometry is not a student of Mr. Hessman's. Okay, last one, final one. If a student's teacher at Boyer Valley is not Mr. Hessman, so you don't have me as a teacher, then that student is not in geometry. Well, that would be a true statement. I'm the only person in this building who teaches a geometry class. So if you're not one of my students, or I'm not your teacher, then that student is not in geometry because I'm the only one teaching it. Now, if you get into a larger school district, that could be a false statement because you might have multiple teachers who teach geometry. So there we have it. Now, as we talked about in the last video, we have the law of contrapositives, and let's check to see if that is true. Law of contrapositive says that the contrapositive and the original condition statement will both have the same truth value. And I noticed the original truth statement was true, and our contrapositive is true. They have the same truth value. That always works. Okay, you're ready to go on to the next assignment, which more than likely is page 79, 40 to 48 all. You're going to be writing conditionals, converses, inverses, contrapositives, and determining truth values that go with them. And then on page 80, the practice quiz. You're good to go.